doing it, so let's see what happens. Go ahead and go live. This is our first time doing it, so it's all right. We are live, but I better get my headphones on so I don't get feedback here. Cool. All right, we are all right. Very cool. So hello world, welcome to the first episode of I don't know if we're going to call this Veteran Wealth Secrets or US Vet Wealth TV or Wealth and Liberty or something like that. But anyways, we're going to have fun. Obviously, this is the beginning. We're not expecting a whole bunch of people to be watching live right now. We just want to test out how this works. But it's a Friday and going to the weekend. I think a theme in a lot of military communities, or at least in my career, is that going into the weekend, we got to make sure everybody's prepared for those couple days where they're not showing up to duty and we don't know what's going to happen. Like anything could go wrong over the weekend if we don't prepare them for doing risk assessment, and somebody's going to come out to get them and they might go down to the payday loan thing. And it's like, yeah. Right. So when soldiers have a little bit of freedom, they go express it, and so there's risks out there, and there are risks, and we could talk a little bit more about kind of why this topic came up, but just in general, I know from Scott and my perspective as former officers versus, and honestly didn't have to do a career to notice this. This is, I mean, we were babied and controlled at West Point from day one. And, as you should, I guess you got to break them down and all that stuff can make us all conform and everything. And of course, that's what boot camp's for on the enlisted side or whatever. But at the end of the day, guess what? We're all going to be a civilian again. We're all going to have to enter the real world. And we can't have, be all these protections around us all the time. And unfortunately, that's what they make military transition or anything non-on base, everything being verified and validated and all that kind of stuff. Even if you're a service disabled veteran, owned business, it's just like there's so much fear when it comes to who's out there to help veterans and who's out there to take from them. And of course, in certain industries or types of things that we think used car salesmen or just cars, the car sales thing is pervasive for the amount of active duty military who get in car loans that are like 20-40%. This kind of stuff happens, yet they sell cars on base and in AFES and right outside of base, and it's kind of like, well, you got to have a car. But what happened in the life insurance industry back in the 80s is these guys would get licensed and they either be part of like a multi-level marketing firm, or they just go hang out at the smoke pits and just hawk insurance to people. They literally do that. And so then there came all these extra regulations that came down. I'm just talking from the financial industry's perspective. I'm sure this happens in a lot of different spaces as well. Anytime there's the fear of people being predatory towards the military community. And so my question today is, what's the opportunity cost for missing out on just immediately jumping to the assumption, sounds like something I need to be skeptical about, and therefore I'll have to look into it more, and therefore I'll never get around to it, and I'm just going to do the status quo, kind of what everybody's doing. And it's like, what's the opportunity cost of the guy who is convinced not to buy a car, for example, right? And or buy a cheap car instead of getting sold the expensive one or whatever, or just to go get more or just to refuse to hear more information just because I've been inundated by a bunch of offers for free information for people who may want to really offer help because it's like, hey, I've had this experience before. in my transition, this thing happened, that thing happened, I could help you avoid it. I actually created a business around this so that I can eat, while also offering that value. And I don't get stuck in a job. I can use all that time now to try to share a bunch of information. And then that gets, the risk is that conversation just maybe gets lumped into everybody's just trying to sell me something. And so I don't know. I thought, Trevor, you have a unique experience. You came in enlisted, became senior enlisted in charge of troops. I remember when, when I was a platoon leader, and on Monday I'd have a soldier come back, 19-year-old married to a Russian he met on Friday night, that kind of stuff. And it's just kind of like, wow, all these kind of things happen. And it's like, and especially in this day and age with so much information, what's the problem? What's the real problem? And maybe what's the answer?
Well, I think part of the problem is there's just you talk about like, hey, I want to go out here and help people, right? I want to go out and do the research and provide solutions that I know are good for them. You're not the only person out there doing that too, right? And so like, while you may be genuine, there's a lot of other people out there who aren't. And that's one of the things is, a lot of these decisions regarding the welfare of troops, those decisions are being made kind of based off of the fear of like, hey, what's the worst thing that's going to happen to these guys out there? Because does the military really care about your individual opportunity cost of every decision that you make? No, that's not their job, right? Their job is to say, hey, we have this mission, we have this focus, and we're going to do everything we can in our power to protect our investment. And then when their service life is over, it's like, hey, well, see you later. Have fun out there. So it's one of those things where I don't know if you want to call it rice bowling or whatever, but they're like, no, these are our people, and you can't talk to them because we need them for this very special thing. And so I get it from that perspective, because that was my job, right? Like as a senior enlisted guy, I was one who had to deal with that guy who, like you said, married the Russian stripper like Friday night. So I understand that, but you're right. Like, there's not everybody out there is out there to screw people over. I think that's one of the awesome things about right now with the veteran economy, the veteran community is that there's a lot of other vets out there who want to help other vets. And you guys probably experience this too when you get out. Like, everybody who gets out is like, oh yeah, I want to do something where I can give back, and so that they go.
I didn't think about that initially at all. I just wanted to get the heck out and get away.
Yeah.
So it's like there's a different, I found much later in life, I was like, man, I wish somebody had helped me.
And that's
Yeah.
that's a driving factor for a lot of them to say, hey, I want to go out and I want to give back, and I want to see that. And so they spend a while doing that, and then they figure like, okay, that's great, I did my part, now I got to go out and take care of business. So
Mhm.
I, like I said, to get back to the point of like the answer to your question is, why does that environment exist? Just because, like, they're an easy target. You've got all these, because I was one. I mean, I was uh I was 17 years old when I graduated boot camp. My
Wow.
life experience was about as thick as a piece of paper. I didn't know anything about anything. So it was, I'll tell you this, like, and this is kind of an embarrassing story. I went to Great Lakes, after I got out of boot camp, and I went to Chicago with some friends of mine, and I was walking off by myself, and so I come up to this guy, and he's like, "Hey, those are some nice shoes." I had like on some Doc Martens, and and he goes, "Those are nice shoes," but he's like, "Would you like me to shine your shoes?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And I was like, "How much?" And he's like, "Well, it's like $10, whatever." And I was like, "Okay." So he's shining me. He goes, "All right, sir, $20." And I'm like, "Okay." Well, I thought it was 10. He's like, "Yeah, it's $10 per shoe." And by the time I got done, this dude had talked me up to $20 per shoe. And I look back at that, and I'm like, man, was I really stupid? And
Well,
it's like, okay, I'll never make that mistake again. But so I see that, like, I experienced it myself, and I'm like, okay, I understand the need to protect people, because there's scumbags out there that just want to take advantage of that. But it's like, okay, how do you differentiate yourself from those people who are like that, especially if you're not like that?
yeah, and I have my own experience that, as an adult in the entrepreneurial world, where you hear a lot of times that there's these fake gurus out there who will take a bunch of people's money and not teach them anything. And yeah, I've bought those things, and a few $1,000s, few thousand, here, $300 there. But it's like, well, could I learn from what they were doing? I mean, it depends on what you take from it sometimes. Sometimes they really are just trying to scam you. I had another guy I hired, and drug me along for a year, and that ended up being in the high five figures of what really ended up being a scam. Now, that said, it did motivate me to do things, and I took advantage of opportunities I never would have seen if this guy hadn't sold me this just bag of goods. He was telling me all sorts of stuff, and I believed him, until I saw through it eventually. But it was like, well, I'm still here, um and it's like, wow, well, I guess there was a positive of me taking a shot. Now, a guy getting you for your boots, of course, is not this, shining your shoes is not the same. But it's just like, I don't know what the right answer there is. uh, 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 I don't regret the mistake at all, because that was so worth it in the long run. It's just trying.
I
It's like,
totally agree.
yeah, it's like
Mine
trying. It's
mine
like,
was only a $40 mistake, not
right,
a.
right. But it's like how taxes work. Everybody thinks you need to save taxes today. Like, I had a client reach out this week, and he's like, hey, can you help me figure out the withholdings on my taxes? And I was like, I'd like to. Technically not allowed to do that. That's a rule in the regulators type thing. That said, my philosophy is, why have the government withhold any of your money? That's sounds like a scam to me.
My
They're
my
gonna they're
dad
gonna
is my dad's been like that for years. He's like, "Hey, I'm happy if I actually have to write a check after it, because he's like, that means
It's
I
like,
had more of my money to use
yeah,
throughout the year."
you had it. Now you got it. Now, of course, this is the other thing where we got to take care. I mean, when the government implemented the withholdings thing, they were like, holy cow, we just take it out of their paycheck before they even know it, and then we make them feel good by sending them a refund, and everybody buys it and thinks this is a good thing on a massive, massive scale, when honestly, this last 6 months have proven they don't even need to tax us, because they can just print it. It's like the whole concept of taxing is simply justifying the jobs of the IRS, and in reality, the way it's functioning right now at the end of the day.
I
Because,
think Scott was going to say something too a
oh
minute
yeah,
ago.
Yeah,
yeah,
well, I actually was a retired '06 that I worked with at Amazon, and he asked me once. He said, "How much do you pay in taxes?" And it struck me then that I couldn't answer it because I had no clue. And he said, "Exactly." He said, "I have zero withheld. I know exactly what I pay every year because they tell me how much I pay because they have had none of my money. It's been mine. I use it for what I need to use it for. I save some, I invest some, whatever it is. But when tax time comes, I know exactly how much I'm giving back to the government, and no one else does, and no one seems to care. And it blew my mind. I have no idea what I'm giving to these folks. It's crazy."
yeah,
But yeah, but Trevor, back to something you said earlier, man. You mentioned how many people and organizations there are out that are trying to help veterans, and that in itself just shows you that the default solution that the government and the military is offering isn't sufficient for everybody. It's the lowest common denominator, right? Like you said, they have a mission. They want to help people transition, so they find something that will work for anyone, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's the best thing for everyone. So just
And
the
I
fact that
actually,
there are
yeah,
so many organizations out there trying to help veterans should be an indicator to folks as they're getting out that they need to do their due diligence, right? So a lot of this comes back to personal responsibility. If I just want to muddle through and just take everything that the Army or the Navy, whatever, gives me on the way out, I'll be okay, right? But it won't be the best that I can be. I just take the default and keep going. So you got to have some responsibility to take some ownership in it and find out what's really out there for you.
Yeah, actually, Scott, I wanted to ask you because your situation is different than mine. Even though we kind of got out after
Trevor, is Scott frozen for you? Because he's frozen for me.
Yep.
All right. Scott, we can't hear you, man.
Looks like this live session.
Huh?
You froze up on us.
Scott, we couldn't hear you.
Oh, am I back?
You are now.
So Scott, I was going to ask you, like, from your perspective, getting out, getting the quote unquote good job, and entering the civilian world, being kind of thrust into it with a family. Like, what are some of the dangers you saw that you wish? It's like, man, why didn't anybody? I mean, maybe similar to what you just said about like that colonel withholding thing. What are the other, let's say scam, for lack of a better term, that's like, man, I wish somebody would have told me about that. Like I just explained with the guy I ran into and the entrepreneur. Basically, I didn't know what a psychopath narcissist was. I just didn't know. I don't know how. I guess I just had nice people surrounding me for most of my life. I guess I just assumed, obviously there's a bunch of those in the military, but maybe that's kind of assumed. But to experience it one-on-one in the real world was just mind-blowing for me. And I just felt like a fool, ignorant, right? It's like, well, what am I going to do now? It's like, well, now I know what that is. Wish somebody would have pointed it out. Ironically, everybody around me was getting scammed by the same guy, so none of us saw it. We were we were all supporting each other through it and allowing it to happen. It was a crazy thing, but it's like, now I could see that if I ever see it happen to anybody around me. So anyways, what are some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I keep saying people need to take responsibility and do their due diligence.
Mhm.
And it's hard sometimes because you don't even know how to do that. I remember negotiating the salary for my first job out, and I actually negotiated myself less than I was making as a captain because I couldn't figure out, or maybe didn't take the time to figure out beyond my base pay and BAH, what am I actually getting paid? So, and I also didn't take the time to figure out to consider, medical benefits and
Mhm.
how great that is, honestly, in the military. And then when you go to a civilian job, right, you've got your salary, but before it gets to your bank, of course, there's going to be your taxes, and then there's going to be all of your benefits. So I failed to do that analysis, and I ended up coming out making less on the civilian side than I did as a captain, when I had been told all along, oh my gosh, you go to West Point, you come out as an officer, you're a JMO, you can write your own ticket. It's going to be great. People will be falling all over you, right? And while there's folks that do genuinely want to help veterans get jobs, you need to know what you're worth, and you need to do some math on it. And, there's no one there to tell you that. And that's why I think all of these businesses are perpetuating and trying to help people just make themselves better.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm glad you bring that up, because I think that's a huge thing when it comes to the financial space, because then there's the self-doubt of what am I worth? I don't really deserve that much. It's like, I remember the first year I as self-employed that I made what I thought was more money than I ever made in the Army. I literally just stopped. I was like, all right, I guess that's good enough for me. And it was odd, because then all of a sudden I had to write a $50,000 check to the German government because of their taxes are very different. And I was like, I don't know what I'm getting for this. So I left Germany. But I mean, if you think about that, yeah, the amount of salary that we think is, oh my gosh, we don't pay our service members enough. It's like, when you add in all that medical, paying for your moves for free. I know, talk about a scam, being over in Germany, the overseas housing allowance, the system there is fascinating. The American taxpayers are funding the housing for the soldiers overseas, right? The housing offices are were run by Germans at the time. And then they're allowed to use realtors. So the realtors help the soldiers who are showing up in Germany, like, I don't know, how do I get a house? Like, don't worry, follow me around. I'll show you all these great places. They know that every service member, based on their rank, gets a certain housing allowance. The service member knows they can use up to the housing allowance, but they don't get to keep any of the extra. They just get it. They just get what they need. So they're thinking, I'll use it all and get the biggest place I possibly can that they don't need. And so but ironically, the actual value on the rental market of these places for a German was half what Americans were paying, because the landlords and these realtors knew they could double the cost, and everybody was taking a cut. And the American taxpayers footing the bill. It was fraud, waste, and abuse, like all day. And then I saw colonels extending, their stays. They were getting $150 per diem per day on top of their salary and the free housing allowances. It's just like, man, so many people are gaming the system. Some of it's internal, and we're worried about these external forces. It's just like, yeah, like you said, you need to do your due diligence and figure out, well, hey, what is best for you? And guess what? Sometimes it's maybe not going to always go the way you thought or hoped. But yeah, I don't know. Anyways, that was just.
But I think when someone does that, if they look at, for example, this survivor benefit plan research that you've done is just second to none, right? Like it is so thorough and well thought out and presented, and it uses facts and data with sources. Like it's an actual real research. And that in itself just tells you, that's something that you can trust. And so again, people want a quick answer. You're really never going to get a quick answer. Sure, you can make a snap judgment on someone and say, this is a scam or this is not. But again, you got to take some responsibility. It's your money, right? This is your money that you're dealing with, or this is your time, or whatever it is that you're looking to get from this person that you're interacting with. You got to spend the time and know who you're doing business with and understand, what they're doing. So that you don't get scammed for high five figures or whatever it was you said. The details are there. You have to do the research.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you bringing that up. It's one of the reasons why I did all the research, is because, like, I don't want to be labeled like a traditional financial advisor or insurance agent or whatever. That's how I know how to get paid, because it's what I learned after the military. I don't feel comfortable, I'm not, nothing wrong with it. I just don't feel comfortable charging people with credit card for my, general knowledge. If they want to come to me for a very specific consulting thing, that's a different story, of course. But, that's why I do Veterati. And I know, Trevor, you just signed up for it. Scott, you might actually want to sign up for that. Think about big tech. And it had a lot of good experiences there. And honestly, for those listening, there was one or two initially, of course, but that's the point of this show. That's the point of our website, the webinars we have coming up, the book we have coming out, just tons of resources and guide. And I know that exists. There's all sorts of great websites and stuff. And I'm saying, hey, go to those nonprofits or other organizations. I also know we've researched it from a different angle, and we're speaking to a different type of service member and veteran who I think has been, I'm speaking to me because I didn't have that the conversation I needed to have. And I recognized years later that, maybe we need to start that conversation, because a lot of these veterans are kind of getting left behind or misled into post-military life and careers that, limit them, or they're maybe looking for something more and they didn't feel like they had permission to do it. And they're scared. It's like, if it's not the perfect thing that everybody else is doing, well, then everybody else is going to say it's a scam if I go do that and stuff. And, that's, you usually hear that with like the multi-level marketing stuff. And it's like, yeah, usually those are pretty rough. Are they all? No. I'm sure there's some good ones and some good opportunities there, but it's like in the financial industry. Is every financial advisor, is every car salesman? It's like, man, I don't know. Do you need the thing or not? Do you see the value in it? And so we put together tons of content to dispel the myths, to give you guys the information you deserve, really, because nobody's really talking about it. And if you like what you hear, come to our webinar, learn more about it. We're going to start holding these things on a regular basis, along with these shows and as well. But specifically on the webinar, we're going to teach the strategy because, you know, similar to that story of the withholdings, it's like, hey, if you got to pay that tax anyways, you at least want to know what it's for. Imagine your strategy where you have put that money somewhere. So you kept it safe. Obviously, you don't want to spend it and then be like at the end of the year, like you owe this tax, you don't have it. So you got to put it somewhere safe, but you want to get it safe where you can grow an interest. But what if you can actually access that money, allow it to pay the tax, but also earn interest even after you've paid the tax? Okay. Too good to be true. How the hell does that happen? It's called arbitrage. You do it when you leverage a real estate investment to buy other real estate. It's not that weird. You can do it with insurance too. If you design it properly, you're not buying it just because you might get hit by a bus. If you're doing a that's called tax mitigation, my friends. And you got to stop just following the status quo of what what everybody thinks the definitions are and what everybody thinks the opportunities are, or the only thing you should do. That's the opportunity cost of not being open to new information, especially in this modern age. Things are moving very quickly. New technology's coming out. And guess what? Technology always wins. So we want to share that technology with you, help you at least be aware of what else is out there and see if it might be a fit for your family. So guys, you got anything else to add?
I guess kind of the way that I look at it is, probably the best way to kind of avoid that, getting lumped in with the scammers and schemers is to, if you want to appear to be altruistic, be altruistic. Don't, there's too many people out there that's kind of try to put on that show. But, here's the thing, like people are smart, like their lizard brain will let them know if you're not being genuine. So, like be upfront, honest with what you're about. And, if it was meant to be, people will come to you to help them with the solution. Because, when people go out to, buy a service or a product, they're not really buying that service or product. They're buying into essentially like a relationship with you. So it's like, hey man, it's just good business. Like that's what you should honestly focus on is, building and maintaining a relationship with an individual instead of just saying like, yeah, here, buy this.
Yeah. Well, cool. I think that's a great way to wrap up this first show. Appreciate you guys being open for a probably controversial topic that I'm sure we'll get accused of, because we bring it up. It's just like, it's like, okay, well, I just get annoyed when veterans are told this is the only way. Anything that deviates is considered weird. And what a shame. That's unfair.
It's almost like Dave Ramsey.
Well, cool. Well, we'll wrap it up at that. Thanks everybody for joining us. And I don't know if this is going to just shut off when I can just do stop live stream. Cool. Well, hey, thanks for joining us for the experiment, and we will see you next. Oh, hey, military-retirementsecrets.com is the webinar about how to keep all of your military pension money without putting your family at risk. Okay, so avoid that 6.5% cost, the SPP. Also avoid really useless term insurance as an option. I'm sorry, only 2 to 3% of those ever pay out, so that doesn't solve the problem. And avoid the high cost and inefficient and really outdated whole life. Okay, there's new technology out there. We're going to show you what it is and how to use it. And yes, it's called life insurance as well. So don't be surprised. All right, take care.